We're going to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice long
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe out there on YouTube. And as always, rate the show 5 stars everywhere that you get your podcast. Just search for Unbearable Sports everywhere that you get your podcast on your phone. And also, welcome back to another camp breakdown as we break down every single position group for the Chicago Bears. Today, we're talking about corners. With people reporting into camp less than a week away, we're getting down to the final week. This is incredible to say, but also we'll have you covered with the NFL training camp, so you want to make sure to stay tuned. But today, we're breaking down the corners like we said, as we always do. We're going to talk about the departures, the depth charts, also the player breakdowns, over-unders, and last but not least, did we get better at the position? But another thing that I want to bring up too is, if you haven't already, link down below in the description. You can download all of our position profiles on free PDF out there so you can read and just see what I have to say about each one of the players. Whether you're listening or watching, you have access to all our position profiles. So let's get started, shall we? And let's talk about some of these departures. This is always what we like to start out with, some key departures that we have on this defense. And at the corners position, we really don't have any key departures, I guess you would say. Because when you look at the depth charts, it's really the exact same, or very, very, very close to the exact same. Because last season, Jaylon Johnson, Kyler Gordon, and Tyreek Stevenson were your starting corners. And this year, it's the same exact starters. And you look at the backups, Terrell Smith, Josh Blackwell last year, and then we had Kindle Vildor. And then Kindle Vildor eventually was no longer a Bear, and then Jaylon Jones was the backup. That's exactly how it is this season as well. So the only difference is really that third string group of corners, where we still have Greg Stroman. We just added Reddy Stewart instead of having Michael Ojemudia. And then also we added in Leon Jones out of Arkansas State as an undrafted rookie free agent. So really not much change when it comes down to the depth chart and the overall starters. Nothing changed there. So we have a lot of people. We're running it back with this cornerback group. So let's just get right into it then, because we don't have to talk too much about the depth chart because it's pretty much set. We saw a lot of this last season, so it's really going to be more on the players rather than what do we do to add talent or remove talent. So let's get started breaking down the players with none other than Mr. Should have been an All-Pro, Jaylon Johnson, because last year, this guy was the best corner in the NFL. He was snubbed of an All-Pro. He should have been first team, easy. Jaylon Johnson, Utah cornerback going into his 5th season, 6 foot, 196, only 25 years old, cap hit of $13 million, and last season, 36 tackles, 1 forced fumble, 4 interceptions, and 10 passes defensed. That's not that impressive. I mean, that's okay impressive. Here's the impressive part. He was the highest graded PFF corner last season with a 90.8 grade. And also, this is my favorite stat. He had a 33.3 quarterback rating when targeted. 33.3. That's terrible. Just do not throw it Jaylon Johnson's way. He was incredibly good last season. And that's why, to me, he was a huge snub from an first team All-Pro. Like, he was just that good. He was the best corner in the league last season. And I think it shouldn't be a fight to say that he played like the best corner last season, because he did. He was locking down everybody, and he just didn't really get the accolades that he deserved. But still, he ended up getting a big-name contract, 4-year, $76 million deal, which I said, I already love that. At $19 million a year, that is a very, very reasonable contract, and he can become a free agent when he's 29 years old. Great deal for both of their parties, but I really like that from the Bears' perspective, because you're not breaking the bank. You're not making him the highest paid corner, which I absolutely love what Ryan Poles does with that. Also, Jaylon Johnson had his healthiest season last season because he's always been banged up. We always knew about that shoulder injury, and knock on wood, was fairly healthy last season. But when he didn't play against the Packers, you saw how much we needed him out there and just the value of a superstar corner. Having a lockdown corner, even though I like Terrell Smith, Jaylon Johnson is just next level. You cannot throw it his direction. And I hope that he still has the same type of season that he did last season. Because that's my big question to all of you. Do you think he's going to repeat this performance and kind of have this back-to-back all-pro caliber seasons? Because when you look historically, coverage stats are volatile. They go up and down, but depending on how good they are, it's a smaller volatility. So like a Jalen Ramsey, he can play like the greatest corner one year, and then he might have a slight down year, but he's still a darn good corner. He's still going to play like a good corner. He's not all of a sudden going to turn into Kindle Vildor. So to me, Jaylen Johnson, I still expect him to play at a Pro Bowl level. Do I expect him to have a 33.3 QB rating when targeted? Probably not. I think that's setting the bar a little bit too high after coming off of this crazy season. But I do still expect him to play at a Pro Bowl level and hopefully even make a Pro Bowl to finally put some respect on this guy's name. Because even before last season, Bears fans, we were the only ones that knew Jaylon Johnson. We're the only people that talked about him and said, listen, this guy can play. This guy is good. Why doesn't he get more credit than what he's being given by the rest of the league? So with that, let's go to the next corner. And the next corner I want to talk about is our slot corner. So for those that aren't very familiar with what do I mean by slot, what do we mean by nickel, just because I do know that there's some questions out there on that. Nickel is really what it means, just in very basic terms, is that you have 3 starting corners. So you have 3 corners out there rather than typically 2. So a good way to describe this is how back in the day with the Chicago Bears, they always had 3 linebackers out there, with Hillenmeyer being the Jack Sanborn of the group. Now, Jack Sanborn doesn't play a lot because instead, Kyler Gordon is going out there. So they're basically replacing a linebacker with a corner. That's what so base is 3 linebackers for the Bears, and nickel is 3 corners for the Bears. So you're really just swapping that out. So a little bit of football discussion, because I do know that there's some questions that are out there about what does that all mean. So hopefully that helps some people out. But let's talk about the slot corner. So the person that plays closer in line rather than those far outside corners, the person that plays usually the person closer to the quarterback. That is Kyler Gordon, cornerback out of Washington, entering his 3rd season, which sounds weird to say. 6 foot, 200 pounds, 24 years old, cap hit of $2.36 million, had 61 tackles last season, 0 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions, and 6 passes defensed. PFF gave him a 65.6 PFF grade, which was good for 75th in the NFL. Now, 57th in the NFL. Although that 57th sounds a little bit bad, I thought that he played a lot better. Remember last season at this time, before going into training camp, we were talking about Kyler Gordon being, people were talking about Kyler Gordon being a bust. Because they're like, hey, he was terrible in coverage in his rookie season. He was always picked on. He was picked on and picked on and picked on. And him being this great athlete, he really shined in training camp. When he came into training camp, everyone's like, dude, Kyler Gordon is good. Kyler Gordon's playing with swag. Kyler Gordon is playing a lot better. And a great way to show this is in 2022. When targeted, he had a quarterback rating of 110.8. And he improved this by only having a QB rating of 86.3 when targeted. Now, yet again, Jaylon Johnson is on a whole nother level with that 33.3. But still, Kyler Gordon in the slot, 86.3. That's not terrible. And he was the story of last year's camp. And that's where Kyler Gordon only played 13 games last season. He was banged up. But towards the end, you really started to see what that hype was all about. He plays with explosiveness. He plays with fire in the run game. And also his coverage skills are just getting better and better and better. And I love that they're bringing this group of 3 back, because you really started to see them vibe together and really started to see them play well together. So Kyler Gordon this year, can he continue blossoming in the slot? What do you guys think? Because to me, I really do think that. I saw him at training camp, and you're like, man, this guy's good. He flies out there. He's aggressive. And I think another year in this system, another year with his brothers around him, I just think that the sky's the limit for Kyler Gordon. And he can be one of the better corners, one of the better slot corners in this league. And that's why I still think that we're going to see some progression, because as he's getting used to things, as he's getting better, he's just bringing it all together. So Kyler Gordon, I really am excited to see what comes out this year. So hopefully he can stay healthy, because when he had that injury, now we're like, okay, now we have to wait for Kyler Gordon again. Now we have to wait for him to come back up. So next, the person on the opposite side of Jaylon Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson. This was Johnny PayPal's boy when we were previewing the Bears last season. But Tyreek Stevenson, cornerback out of Miami, going into his second season, 6 foot, 198, only 24 years old. Very, very young group of corners. Like 24-year-old Stevenson, 24-year-old Gordon, and 25-year-old Jaylon Johnson. Isn't that nuts that Jaylen Johnson is only 25? It's just crazy. Like, such a good future with these young corners. Now Tyreek Stevenson going into his second season, getting paid $1.46 million. And you look at last season, 86 tackles. And I'll tell you, this is because he was targeted a lot. Because I'm not targeting Jaylen Johnson, and also Kyler Gordon got a lot better, so I'm going to target Tyreek Stevenson. That's why when he was targeted, 65.5% reception percentage and also a 100.4 passer rating when targeted. He also had 2 forced fumbles last season, 4 interceptions, and 16 passes defended. Yet again, he was really out there and he's an aggressive ball player. And we said this last season, that he was going to have these ups and downs. He was going to have more highlight plays than a lot of these other corners, and that was true. And I still expect this to be the same. Stevenson is aggressive. He's going to be going after the ball. He's going to have some ups and downs, but I do think towards the end of the season, you saw him get better. You saw him progress. You saw him be better. And I think that's going to be the big question. Can he continue to build off of that phenomenal end to his 2023 season? Because if he can, this guy's going to look good. This guy's going to be really, really good. And I think Stevenson might be the biggest question. Because I think that Kyler Gordon's going to be solid at least. Jaylen Johnson's going to be Jaylen Johnson. And if Stevenson can take that next step, who are you going to throw it to? Because you have the good linebackers in the middle, and you have the upgrades with the safeties. This defense is going to be very scary if Stevenson can just continue that upward trajectory that he was on. But PFF, the grade that they gave him, 60.2, which was good for 80th. Yet again, more so towards the tail end, you started to see that grade go a little bit higher as he got used to the NFL speed and the players around him. But also he continues to just be that good size that we want to see out of the corner position. He's got those long arms and just great size, 6 foot with long arms. But also something that I think some of us forgot. Last season, he was being rotated a little bit with Terrell Smith. Terrell Smith and him had that position battle, and ultimately it went to Tyreek Stevenson. So I wanted to bring that up because sometimes when we do this and we go into the next season, we forget where these players came from. And Terrell Smith and Tyreek Stevenson would sometimes just kind of flip-flop. So it was that weird little rotation that they had going on because Stevenson, I think it was more so just seeing what the other corners can do and Stevenson not being super, super consistent out there. So this year, I'm hoping. I believe that he can come back into this season and continue to build off of that good, solid season at the end of 2023 because, like we said on this show, he was going to have an up and down season, and he did. But he had a lot of ups, and that's why I think he's going to continue to build off of that with everybody else around him. And now, let's go to the last little profile that I have before we start breaking down more into the over-unders and also did we get better, and also just some of the other players that are lower a little bit down on the roster just to at least bring up. So I want to talk about Terrell Smith going into his second season, 6 foot, 204 out of Minnesota. Another 24-year-old. He's getting paid less than $1 million this year. And from a tackles perspective, Still, let me just double check this because this is crazy. 49 tackles last season for Terrell Smith. 1 forced fumble and 6 passes defense, 0 interceptions. He had a 69.6 PFF grade, which is good for 40th. And he played a total of 344 snaps at outside corner. I don't remember him being out there that much, but he was. Because yet again, he was kind of rotating with Tyreek Stevenson. And when someone went down, Terrell Smith would come in. And Terrell Smith played a lot on that outside side. Also an 81.4 passer rating allowed when targeted. So still pretty good. And this was someone that when we drafted him in the 5th round, he was coming off of, why he dropped to the 5th round was even though he was coming off of a career year at Minnesota and he has the body type of an NFL corner. The reason why he dropped was just because of 1 year of production. And people were going, I don't think he can duplicate this at the NFL level. But the guy can tackle, the guy can cover, the guy can do it all. And truly, Terrell Smith continued to show that, like, hey, I'm still good. Like, I'm still a really good backup. And it makes you feel really good about the depth that you have at the position, even though that when he was out there against the Packers, they destroyed the secondary. I think that's more because of Jaylon Johnson rather than Terrell Smith, so to speak, because Jaylon Johnson is just that good. When you lose one of your stars, that's what happens. But Terrell Smith also only allowed 58.1% of passes his way. So yet again, very good rookie season for someone that a lot of people were questioning, is he going to be good? And now the big question that I have for him, how high can he grow? How high can he be on this team? And it's kind of similar to like a Noah Sewell and like a Jack Sanborn, where they're these players that have shown some promise when given the opportunity. But they're not really going to be, he's not going to be beating out Tyreek Stevenson or Kyler Gordon anytime soon. He's just going to be the backup. So to me, Terrell Smith, I would like to see him more. I'd like to see him progress, and I hope he progresses during training camp. But it's hard because there's already people set in front of him. So Smith just continued to get better, and that's my big question with him. It's just that whole how much room does he have to grow here in Chicago? So Terrell Smith, very comfortable with him being our backup. But the other backups that we have, we continue to have Josh Blackwell, just a good, solid slot corner, nothing crazy. But Greg Stroman still continues to be one of my favorite players that we have as a backup. Greg Stroman, just a good foundational player that you can play on the outside, on the inside. I always really like him on this team. And then Jaylon Jones, who started, but remember, he started 2 years ago. And now he's one of our primary backups too. He played well inside and outside as well. But Leon Jones, we talked about him, a couple months ago. Leon Jones is someone to look out for because out of Arkansas State, he was someone that was making some big plays out in rookie training camp. And people saying, hey, he's got the size, he's got the length, and hey, you look pretty darn good out there. So I'll definitely have an eye out for him out during training camp. But now, let's get into the over-unders, shall we? So the over-unders for the cornerback position, let's get this started. And yet again, these are just cornerback numbers. So for cornerbacks, last season we had 11 interceptions. So now the question, over or under 11 interceptions? Now, if you're watching out there, just let me know over under for cornerback interceptions, not safeties included, not linebackers included. To me, I'm going under because I think we got a lot of interceptions last season. I still think we're going to do well, but I think maybe like 3 apiece type of deal. I think it's going to be just like, I think 10 would be a really good season for them. I think 11 is just a little too much. They had a lot of interceptions last season. So that's why I'm going under with the 10. And then next, Kyler Gordon games that he plays in, 15.5. So will he be able to play close to a full season? Injuries have been something that have popped up. And I always hate, I don't know why I even put this on here because I don't like talking about injuries sometimes. But part of me wants to just say under just because he has been injury prone. But I want to say over. And you know what? I said under, I think, for Jaylen Johnson last season. So I'm going to go under again for Kyler because then he proved me wrong. Jaylen Johnson proved me wrong. He was healthy for for a majority of the season. So Kyler, let's stay healthy, be good, and I think he's going to start turning heads because he's such a fun player to watch. And when you talk about like HBO's going to be all over Kyler. Just the whole aesthetic that he brings, I think that would be great. Next, passing yards, 237, which was one of the best in the league for the Bears last season. So this is just overall, will the Bears allow more or less than 237 passing yards? And for this, I'm going to go over. I'm going to go over just because I think that 237 is really good. And I think that maybe it's just going to be a little bit more, but I don't think it's going to be 300. I don't think it's going to be significantly more. So I'm going to, I think it's going to be around that though. I'll go over just a little bit. Like, what? Fine. I'll go under. I'll go in the 220. Why not? So this Bears defense is going to be interesting because we could stop the run really well. And I think in the past, it was more so because of the pass rush that we had struggles with. So, I'm going to say 230 then. I'll go under just for the good vibes. We're going to allow less passing yards. And last but not least, Pro Bowls at 0.5. Will we finally get a defensive Pro Bowl? I'm saying yes. Put Jaylen Johnson in. I think Jaylen Johnson has a good season. Yet again, I don't think it's going to be as good as his season was last year, but it's still going to be a really good season. And I think us Bears fans, we're going to say, Jaylen needs to be in. We have to put him in the Pro Bowl. I think that's over. I think we force him in because he deserves it. He deserves a Pro Bowl. I think he's going to play like a Pro Bowl. And I think we're going to get him in like an Akeem Hicks, where Hicks never really made the Pro Bowl until later on, where we're like, okay, we got to get this guy in. And last but not least, did we get better? And this one might actually be the hardest one that we go through. The linebackers were interesting too, because linebackers and corners, not a lot of change happened with this position. And I think when you compare the two, Kindle Vildor dropping off, Jaylon Jones coming in, not going to factor that in too much because Kindle Vildor really wasn't out there all that much. So you're really just looking at the players and you're projecting out progression and regression. So to me, Jaylon Johnson, like I said before, I think from a production standpoint will technically regress. So nobody get bent out of shape. I just don't think he's going to have a 33.3 passer rating. I think he's still going to be a Pro Bowler, like I said. But then you have Kyler Gordon and Tyreek Stevenson. And I think it's reasonable to expect some progression out of Kyler Gordon. I think that he was showing and demonstrating the type of player he was. And I think if he can stay healthy and continue to play healthy, then you're going to see the Kyler Gordon that we saw at training camp last season and what we saw towards the tail end of the season where he was really just playing with this new fire. And Tyreek Stevenson, with another year under his belt, I think will play a lot better. Same thing with Terrell Smith as well. So because of that, I think that those three corners are all moving up and moving the arrow up. So because of that, we're going up. I think that this is another spot that we're getting better. And for those that are keeping track, every single position group so far, we've been saying getting better. And I don't think it's that far off. Like every time that we've been talking about this, we're explaining ourselves and saying this is why the Bears should have a better season and have better position groups than last year. So all these moves are pretty comfortable and pretty easily moving forward. So also, if you're watching and listening, make sure to drop a like, make sure to subscribe, and also rate the show 5 stars if you're watching. Tell a friend too. Let them know about the show because we got those free position profiles down in the description that you can download. Also, we'll have you covered for all of the training camps that are going on. I like to just kind of bring in all the information that I'm hearing, that I'm getting from other sources, and just letting you know, hey, here's a quick 10-minute. This is what's going down in training camp. And if you haven't seen those, you're missing out. So make sure to subscribe. Make sure to put this into your podcast rotation. And with that, Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair and